Y'all give it up for the next governor of Georgia. Get on your feet. Come on now. Stacey Abrams. And our next Secretary of State, Nguyen. Welcome, Leader Abrams, to Gwinnett.
Thank you.
Stacey, you say Abrams, Stacey.
Abrams! 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 Win!
I also like Stacey wins. And be forever.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being out here. Any Vietnamese people in the house? Okay, well, for the Vietnamese people, Kính chào quý vị. My name is B. Nguyen. For everyone else, my name is B. Nguyen. I am the proud Democratic nominee for Georgia Secretary of State, and I'm running because I believe that every eligible Georgian should have access to the ballot box without barriers. And I want to tell you about what's been happening in our state of Georgia. I've been a state representative for the last 5 years, and in fact, Stacey Abrams was my predecessor. She left some pretty big shoes to fill. And as a lawmaker, I've sat on the committee that typically oversees our election laws, and every single year there has been some bill introduced to make it harder for Georgians to vote, including trying to eliminate Sunday voting and trying to roll back our City of Atlanta voting hours. Now, I want to take you to 2020. 2020 is a year that we knew if we brought Georgians together from every corner of the state, no matter your race, your gender identity, your religion, your nationality, the language you speak, that we would deliver a win based on the shared values of equality for all, of justice for all, of defending our democracy. And so early on, before the results of the 2020 election, Republicans started coordinating talking points, and they started to sow seeds of doubt around the validity of vote by mail. No excuse, no ID, passed under Republican control, used in greater numbers by Republicans every single year up until 2020, when we were learning how to vote safely during a pandemic. And they did so that when we delivered a win, which we did, thanks to our broad-based coalition, they tried to invalidate the will of the people. They sent Rudy Giuliani and Trump's legal team into my committee. They subjected us to 8 hours of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and lies. And when I fought back, they put my name on a right-wing gun site, and they called me a traitor, and they called for my execution. And then they sent alternative electors to our state capitol, and those alternative electors tried to invalidate the will of the people. And then behind closed doors, my colleagues said, we don't believe the election was stolen, but then they signed on to the lawsuit to try to overturn the will of the people. Now, I was pretty naive. I thought, January 6th, this is the precipice. We're witnessing, for the first time in our nation's history, a sitting president deny the peaceful transfer of power, resulting in a deadly and violent insurrection. And I thought, surely my colleagues will have some internal reflections on what led to this moment. But instead, we went back into legislative session. Our state capitol was heavily armed and guarded every single day. And they passed Senate Bill 202, a 2-page bill turned into a 98-page voter suppression bill that makes it harder to vote by mail, that takes away secure drop boxes and puts them indoors, that makes it a crime to hand out a bottle of water to a voter waiting in line. And in the state of Georgia, people waited up to 11 hours in 2020 just to exercise a constitutional right. And then it blew open the door for any individual to come before our local election boards and challenge the voting eligibility of any Georgian, unlimited. And they went to Gwinnett County, challenging over 37,500 voters. So the question we have here is, why do Georgia Republicans not want people to vote, including my opponent? My opponent did not find those extra 11,780 votes, but he has fully backed a voter suppression bill that makes it harder for Georgians to show up. And we know already that more people's applications are being rejected. More ballots are being rejected. And I want you all to think about how this affects the AAPI community specifically. Our community votes by mail in a greater number than any other community. And I think about why that is. And I think about my parents with limited English proficiency wanting to vote in the comfort of their home, where if they have a question, they can ask their children what exactly they need to do in order for them to feel empowered to vote and feel like they can make a good decision on who they're voting for and how to make sure that vote counts. That affects our community's ability to vote. So here's the thing. We know that AAPI voters have been instrumental in changing our state. In 2020, the win that we delivered made only possible because we turned out to vote. And again in 2021, we turned out to vote. And we have a consequential election coming up ahead. Now, we have to send Senator Warnock back to the Senate, right? And our Senator, Reverend Raphael Warnock, from the great state of Georgia, he says, a vote is a kind of prayer. It is a kind of prayer, and when we go and we exercise our constitutional right to vote, we are acting on our faith. It is an act of faith. When we go to the ballot box, we are saying we believe that no Georgian should have to die or go bankrupt because they don't have access to health insurance. We are saying we believe when a child comes into this world, they should have quality and equitable education no matter where they live or the color of their skin. We are saying we believe that when we go to our places of worship, when we go to the grocery store, when we go to work in the morning, we should not have to be afraid we will be gunned down by gun violence. We are saying we believe that the government does not belong in the doctor's office with women. And we are saying that we believe that our democracy depends on having access to the ballot box, and the more people who vote, the healthier we are as a country. There is only one person on the ballot running for governor who can deliver that for us. Her name is Stacey Abrams. And so our task here tonight is to remind our community of the importance of showing up and electing somebody who sees us, who hears us, who will listen to the issues that affect our community, and somebody who has supported me from the time I was elected into office in 2017 until now. And together with Stacey Abrams, I am running because I believe in the future of our state, I believe in our democracy, and I will protect the freedom to vote for every eligible Georgian and ensure we have free and fair elections in all of our counties. And I can't wait until we show the world once again that Georgia gonna show up and we're gonna elect Stacey Abrams as our next governor.
Thank you, B. Thank you. So I was talking to B outside. She made me hug her. And when we were talking about what does this mean for Georgia? Why are we here? We are here for amazing boba tea by a nurse who is starting her own business. Y'all should cheer for her. Rebel House, woo! I think she's trying to get you to market her stuff. It's okay. We are here because we are 32 days away from destiny. This is an opportunity for Georgia to not just show the world who we are, but to show ourselves who we can be. That's what this election is about. But B and I have an unusual request. We're trying to ask you to fire somebody and hire us instead. And when you're asking someone to be fired, they get a performance review, right? So let's do a performance review. When it comes to the current governor, he has excelled in 3 areas: proving he doesn't care, he won't help, and his only ambition is to attack our freedoms. Now let me tell you how I can prove it. doesn't care, because in the state of Georgia, we are number 48 in access to mental health care services. We are number 2 in the number of uninsured. We have a state where we are number 9 in the nation for gun violence, but guns are the number 1 killer of our children. We live in a state where people of color, where the minority population is 48% of the population, but it will take 100 years for us to achieve economic parity under the system that he has in place. We are 48% of the population, but only 12% of the business revenue. And his answer is, he'll study it. Well, I'm here to tell you, he can study off my paper. He can cheat off my paper if he wants, because we know what the answer is. When our hospitals are shutting down, 6 hospitals under 1 governor, and he sends back $12 billion of your tax dollars, raise your hands if you've paid federal taxes. Then you've already paid for Medicaid expansion. You've already paid for WellStar. You've already paid for Medicaid and for the finances we need in the state, but he doesn't care. In fact, there was a report yesterday that shows that my plan will cost us $500 per person and pay for 500,000 people. His plan costs $2,500 per person and will only pay for 50,000 people. And the rest that get left out and left behind, it's because he doesn't care. But let's go a step further. He also won't help. This is a state where we are sitting on $400 million to address a housing crisis in the state of Georgia. And yet 60% of the applicants have had their applications rejected, while he makes money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate. And when he was asked a few days ago whether or not he would address the issue of affordability in housing, he said he was afraid it would upset the investors. The same investors who are buying up our apartments, driving out their tenants, and driving up our rents. He won't help. He won't help us when our children are in need of more teachers in the classroom. When I said let's pay them $50,000 a year in starting salary and give every teacher an $11,000 raise, he said no, we can't afford it. And yet he can afford to give companies billion-dollar tax incentives, but not an $11,000 pay raise to our teachers. It's because he won't help. And let's talk about his attacks on our freedoms. He has attacked our right to vote. There was recently a decision on a federal case I filed a few years ago. There may have been an election that you might have heard about. And based on that election, we filed a lawsuit not to make me the winner, but to make us accountable as a state. And in a 288-page opinion, the federal judge repeatedly said that Georgia operated a racist system, and that had the Brnovich decision in 2021 not weakened the Voting Rights Act, we had met our burden to be included in a Section 2 charge against this governor when he was Secretary of State. He attacks the right to vote by doing exactly what B laid out, but it's even worse than that. He is proud of it. He is proud of the fact that he is an election denier, but we keep thinking election denier is about denying the outcome. You're an election denier when you deny access, and he is hell-bent on denying access to the right to vote in the state of Georgia. But Nguyen and Stacey Abrams are going to put it right here. We're going to fix it. He attacks our right to vote, and he's also willing to attack our right to privacy. If you are a woman in the state of Georgia, you are in jeopardy under the current governor of this state. 1 in every 5 women in the state of Georgia does not have access to health insurance. We've got 82 counties that do not have an OBGYN. And regardless of your personal opinion about a woman's right to choose, we must believe that a doctor knows more than Brian Kemp about the biology of a woman and the future of our families. That's got to be the truth. And the reality is that he is also attacking our right to safety. We live in a state where gun violence has gone up under Brian Kemp, not down. Where gun laws have been weakened, not strengthened. This is a state that has no universal background checks, no waiting periods, no permit purchase information that helps us stop our guns from being part of the lead pipeline. Georgia is one of the top states for sending weapons to other parts of the country. It's so bad in Georgia that we've been in not 1 but 2 episodes of FBI Most Wanted. It's only been on for 3 weeks. How are we already in 2 episodes? That's the challenge with this governor. He attacks our freedoms with impunity, and he coasts by because he's hoping we don't notice. That we don't notice that we're afraid to go outside sometimes. That when you send your children to school, you send them with an extra prayer and a see-through backpack. That we are sending our children to fortresses of fear and not cathedrals of learning. And that we're asking our teachers to be guards, not guides. We need a governor who doesn't attack our freedom to move about and be in safe spaces. And we need a governor who doesn't attack our ability to make the best choices for ourselves and our families. That is why he needs to be fired. But let's talk about the applicant standing before you who wants the job. You see, I'm running for this job because I know that we've got to get back to the basics in the state of Georgia. Education, housing, health care, and making certain that you can make a good living whether you work for yourself or someone else. And to do that, we have to do a few things. On education, we've got to invest in our teachers, invest in our paraprofessionals, but we've also got to put money into child care in the state of Georgia so working families can take care of their children in our state. We have to make universal pre-K truly universal. I've never met a 4-year-old who could put off turning 5. So how do you have a waiting list for 4-year-olds? We have to have a governor who understands that we must fully fund education, especially English proficiency, and that we need teachers in the classroom who look like the students that they are raising up. And in the state of Georgia, that means diversity looks like this room. And when our children finish, they deserve access to 20,000 apprenticeships so they can learn while they earn. They should be able to go to technical college for free so they can become nurses and they can become technicians and they can become engineers and they can get the education they need without going into debt. And we have to expand access to hope. Hope is good, but we learned during COVID that sometimes you have tragedies you don't foresee. Sometimes you take a class that's a little harder than you expected. And even if you get a C, you should still be able to see your way all the way through. And in Stacey Abrams, Georgia, we're going to get that done. But education's just the beginning. We need health care in the state of Georgia. We are losing a level 1 trauma center in a state that's already woefully underserved. As of October 14th, the emergency room that serves so many thousands of Georgians right now is shutting down. And they're sending them to Grady, and they're sending them to Emory, and they're sending them to Northside and to Piedmont. But the reality is not all of them are going to get there, and not all of them are going to get in. I don't know if you know, but not everyone has the money to hop in a cab and make their way to Brookhaven. They may not know that they've got to turn around and go all the way down to Macon if they need to get to a level 1 trauma center, because when we lose the Atlanta Medical Center, Grady Hospital is the only level 1 trauma center to serve 57% of the population of Georgia. Let me put that into context. Charleston, South Carolina has 3. Georgia, Metro Atlanta is about to be down to 1. And it's not because we didn't know it was happening. It's not because we couldn't afford to save it. It's not because we can't afford to fix it now. It's because Brian Kemp doesn't care. But at my first act as the next governor of Georgia, I will expand Medicaid in the state of Georgia. I will save our hospitals, and I will save our lives. That's our responsibility. And then there's the affordable housing crisis in Georgia, a crisis he has not only ignored, but he has fomented by refusing to put money that he received for this purpose to the purposes for which it was intended. When I talk to a senior citizen who's afraid to complain about the mildew in her apartment because she's going to get evicted if she opens her mouth. When I talk to the young woman who just finished graduate school and is trying to find an affordable apartment but can't find one without getting 2 or 3 additional jobs. When I talk to the new person who's trying to start a business, but they can't afford the risk because the cost of rent is $1,596, and that's 50% of what they make, then we've got a problem with housing in Georgia. And this governor has answered that call with a deafening silence. But as governor of Georgia, I'm going to create a $500 million fund that will make certain that we have access to affordable housing throughout the state of Georgia, and especially right here in Gwinnett County, because we've got to do right by our people. And then there's making a good living. I grew up, my mother called us the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS and we read books. My parents wanted us to understand, though, that we had the right to more, that we had the right to dream, to strive. My father is sitting here. Daddy, wave your hand. I tell folks my dad is the first feminist I ever met, but he was also the first entrepreneur I met. I didn't know that's what he was, but when he would take us with him to go and pick up fallen logs when the storms would come through Gulfport, Mississippi, when we would drag those logs as he cut down trees, we didn't realize that he was making ends meet by doing an extra job to get it done. But what I know now is that my father was an entrepreneur. And we've got thousands of them in Georgia. We've got thousands of them across the state, but they don't get the help that the big companies get. We've got a governor who believes in big game hunting. He's going to go and find every big company he can find. And I don't begrudge those jobs coming to Georgia. But 99% of the businesses in Georgia are small businesses. They hire 43% of the people, and they get very little of the money. As the next governor of Georgia, I'm going to invest in the small businesses in Georgia. I'm going to grow small businesses right here, and I'm going to make sure we have everything we need to grow strong. I'm going to leave you with this. There are 4 C's to how I want to serve Georgia. I want us to have child care. I want us to have access to college. I want our families to have capital, and I want our businesses to have contracts. Because if we do those things to make a good living and make a good life, we will make our promises come true. Georgia is sitting on a $6.6 billion surplus right now. Money that's already in our bank account. Money that's in our piggy bank. It's after we've paid every bill, after we've put money aside, after we've put 15% aside, we've got $6.6 billion. And the current occupant of the job says that we need to give it in handouts to the wealthy, that we need to parse it out, not invest it in. Well, I grew up knowing that my responsibility was to look out for others. Whether you're in the middle class reaching higher, in the working class reaching forward, or down at the bottom just looking up hoping someone sees you. We've got to look out for our disabled veterans and our homeless. But we've got to look out for our teachers and our paraprofessionals. We've got to look out for those who are doing their best but need a little extra help. And to get it done, we've got to hire new leadership in the state of Georgia. We've got to hire new thinking in the state of Georgia. We've got to believe we deserve more in the state of Georgia. Because I'm here to tell you, it took 2 men to break Georgia. It's going to take these 2 women to put it right. Thank you so much.
All right. So we have some time for a few questions. Who would like to ask Stacey or be a question? Please raise your hand. Right over here. Come on. No? Over here.
Mental health is a great concern. If you could speak to that, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. So mental health, as I pointed out, we are number 48 in the provision of access to services. And what that means in Georgia is that even though we have a new law that's supposed to help expand mental health, it's a mental health insurance parity law, meaning you only get help if you have insurance already. But as I mentioned, Georgia has the 2nd highest uninsured rate in the nation. And right now, the number 1 provider of mental health services in Georgia is not our hospitals, it's our prison system. It's law enforcement. Because if you are too poor to get help, then the most likely outcome when you need help is that you go to jail, not to a hospital. So as governor, my first responsibility is going to be to expand Medicaid. And I want everyone, we hear Medicaid expansion and we think